Well, the cherry blossoms are out for this rescheduled Japanese Grand Prix now in April. Good to see. Weather not brilliant, though. Dull and overcast FP1. Got some interesting running in FP1, although most of the teams dismissing it as being fairly inconsequential because of the compressed time. It was going to prediction of rain in FP2. It rained towards the end of FP1, and FP1 foreshortened also by Logan Sargeant going off in the Williams. Let's talk about that. He's the guy, you'll recall, who didn't get to race in the Australian Grand Prix because he's the guy that didn't damage his car in FP1 in Melbourne. That was Alex Albon. And as a result of that shunt of Albon's, which did damage his chassis, he took over Logan Sargeant's car because there was no spare chassis at Williams. There's still no spare chassis at Williams as we get to Japan 2 weeks later. And he went off, Logan. I'm not massively surprised because it's a weird thing for a racing driver to have to sit out a Grand Prix, and he hasn't even gone off and caused the damage himself, as he did in Australia. And then to come back, and I guess with a bit of a point to prove, maybe pushing too hard in FP1, all these things add up. Not without reason, really, you could say. Anyway, went off in quite a weird place, ran wide coming out of Dunlop in FP1, which is the top of the hill after the S is the left-hander. And normally, there's a reasonable amount you can do with the car there. And he just got on the edge and couldn't do much with it and then went off into the barrier. And that was the end of his day. No chassis or power unit damage. You've got to be pleased for Williams in that respect. But, not a great thing at the moment. Williams not in a great place, I think. New front wing on the car for Alex Albon. Didn't really get a chance to try that. Anyway, that's Williams done for the day. For the rest of it, it was quite interesting. There were two aspects, I thought, to all of Friday and what we saw in Japan. One was what we saw on the track. And then I don't often refer to this, but then also what we saw on the Thursday in the press conference. Get onto that in a minute, a little bit further into this video. Let's just talk about the nitty-gritty of the day. As I say, it was all about FP1. Knowing that there was a very good chance of rain in FP2, there was a lot to do, obviously, in that first session. Pirelli have brought a very, very hard range of tyres here. The other extreme of the Australian Grand Prix, very hard, soft, medium and hard. That's because it's so abrasive at Suzuka. And that meant that the soft tyre got a lot of running, and Pirelli right now saying it's a potential race tyre off the line. It's going to give you good grip for the early phase of the race. In brackets, George Russell saying it's definitely a one-lap only tyre. I think he's just referring to getting the best from it in qualifying, but a little bit of the jury out amongst the teams. But Pirelli saying the soft tyre is a race tyre. For a while, Lewis Hamilton was quickest. Lewis was looking pretty good in the Mercedes out of the box. The car seems to have a reasonable sweet spot here. Also reasonable top speed. Well, let's have a look at the times now. Lewis eventually finished, at P5 there, just behind George, 30.5. But at the time, that 30.5 was a good 3 or 4 tenths quicker than anybody had gone on the soft tyre. It was a really good lap by Lewis. And the top speed, as you can see there, 295. George Russell, 295 as well, which puts them alongside Red Bull. Now, whether that's going to stay that way for the rest of the weekend, of course, is up for debate, because Max still finding a good, well, if you look at 30.0, the next quickest time, Carlos Sainz 30.2, and he's slightly quicker in a straight line doing that. And bearing in mind Sergio Perez only did a 30.2 as well, you've got to assume that Max pushing it, would probably be well under 30. And that's a quick lap compared with last year. It's about 1.6 seconds quicker than last year, which shows the strength of the soft tyre, I guess, and also how much progress has been made by the teams over the past 6 months. A lot, really. Impressive to see that. And now's probably an appropriate time to bring in, which I thought there were two quotes of the day today. And one was from Max saying the bounce wasn't too far out, which means that the car felt pretty good. And it's just interesting, isn't it, that these days it's not ride height, it's not spring rates, it's not brake settings, it's not top speed, it's just the bounce. I had to read that twice to think, what does he mean now? Is he just sort of, is that basketball vernacular? Oh, no, he's talking about the bounce isn't too far out on this occasion. So basically they're all living with bounce, I guess. It's a question of how much you can put up with, and how much the bounce possibly it's dynamically in sync with what the car is doing, maybe. That's what he means, maybe. It's too far out. Anyway, I thought that was quite an interesting quote from Max. So he was quickest, 30.0. Carlos, 30.2. Looking good again in the Ferrari. Slightly quicker than Charles every time he went out. Yeah, everybody's got upgrades here, mainly flaws and things we can't see. But on a couple of the cars, I say like the Albon Williams front wing. But Carlos looking really good and composed and in control of his weekend already, 30.2. And yeah, just 3 kilometers down in top speed. That's kind of what I was saying after Melbourne, that in terms of the overall lap, Red Bull are going to be able to match anybody and do that with a top speed advantage. Of course, they can trade that off. They can get rid of that top speed and then give themselves an even bigger sweet spot in terms of tyre management with more downforce if they want to. But the two Mercedes, looking good. George Russell, Lewis Hamilton, Sergio Perez in there, P2. Charles Leclerc, 30.5, shades slower, 0.2 slower than Carlos. And then Fernando Alonso, 30.5 as well, in there, kind of dancing with the music, 2.93 with the Aston Martin, looking pretty good spot to be in. I haven't got the other top speeds there because Oscar Piastri and Lando Norris didn't run the soft. They ran the medium in that one lap blast, if you like. So McLaren looking good on that medium tyre. Yuki Tsunoda also pleasing his local fans with another good performance. And in the other car, another Japanese driver, Ayumu Iwasa, who did a very good job. He's looked very good in Formula 2. He's doing Super Formula this year. And very strong performance as well by him. So, yeah, the crowd didn't get a great day in terms of the weather, but they certainly got two Japanese drivers out in the same team. Can't think that's ever happened before, ever, in the history of the sport. Maybe I'm wrong there, but it was good for the fans nonetheless. So let's have a look at the speed trap from that FP1 when the speeds through the trap, basically when they were on the soft tyre doing those quick runs. Although Lando Norris, as I say, a bit of an anomaly there, probably some mega toe as well, I would think. 299, almost 300 kilometres an hour through the trap. But the trends there are clear to see. Sergio Perez representing Red Bull, if you like, right up there. The Williams quick in a straight line as well, as are the Hasses. I think the significant thing there is how good Mercedes at the moment, Friday before the weekend, look. 298 for Lewis Hamilton and George Russell, 295, pretty good. And although Max Verstappen's there mid-pack, 295, look at Sergio Perez's speed. I think that's an indication of how much Red Bull have in hand. They're probably running different setups at that point as well. Fernando midfield and Ferrari relatively slow, 294 through the traps for Carlos Sainz and Charles Leclerc. With the prospect of rain in FP2, the teams did a compressed fuel run session towards the end, not many laps, although because Lewis felt pretty comfortable with the balance of the Mercedes, they got him out first with fuel in the car on the soft tyre. Most runners choosing the soft and showing that it is a good race tyre. And Lewis, look at the number of laps Lewis did, and look how consistent Lewis is. That's a Lewis Hamilton, and he's enjoying his driving again for sure, particularly Suzuka. But to have the Mercedes reasonably well balanced this early in the weekend is, it's nice. Haven't had that all year so far, have they? So Lewis, starting at 35.9. Let's just look at what Ferrari start with on their out lap on soft. Carlos Sainz 35.7, so 0.2 there. But then George did a 35.7 as well on his out lap, and Charles Leclerc on the hard tyre, 35.7. So that's a pretty good performance by Charles Leclerc. Let's not get ahead of ourselves there. 35.9, Lewis 35.9, 36.3, and then he's in the high-ish 36s. So there are not enough laps done by everybody else really to be able to compare. Let's look at Fernando Alonso, 35.6, a bit quicker on the outlap, and then into the high 36s as well. So Aston Martin, you could say, about on a par with Mercedes right now. And then right at the end of Lewis's run, just to finish that, they sort of did their hard run, and they felt they got some pretty good results, 3:37, 2:37.1s, and then a 37.7 at the end. And they put Lewis on a set of mediums at the end to see how that was as well, and did a 35.3 on that. So that was a good day's running for Lewis, the best he's had so far this year for sure. Max Verstappen on the hard tyre. Red Bull going into this absolutely conservative on this Friday. Conservative in terms of top speed, giving themselves lots of downforce and running the hard tyre as well. 36.4, 36.2, 36.2, 36.6. But having said that, look at Charles Leclerc, also on the hard tyre, and dismissing the day as not being particularly productive. 35.7, 35.2, 35.6. That will make Red Bull look twice for sure. And he's got a top speed advantage at the moment. Repeating the point, Red Bull probably going to be changing setup big time going into the weekend. But an interesting run by Charles Leclerc there, that's for sure, on the hard tyre. McLaren, not there. They were doing 34s when the top runners were doing 35s, 36s, which suggests they weren't on heavy fuel or as heavy a fuel load, which is why we don't have them in there. Look, as I say, Ferrari doing a nice job splitting between the soft and the hard with these fuel runs, and Charles Leclerc looking very good, I thought, on that hard tyre. And just to finish the day's running before we go on to the other business, I thought this was another good quote worth mentioning. This is from Logan Sargeant after he put the Williams in the wall at Dunlop. I put the car in a place I didn't realise I was at. I think there are a million things you can say about that. One is there are a lot of words there which basically say, I crashed. But beyond that, there's the whole business of putting the car in a place where you think you know you are, but you aren't. And that kind of goes well over my IQ. I can't even begin to understand what that really means. So anyway, it's probably as a result of lots of sim stuff. I think it's probably sim talk, is it? I don't know. We'll see tomorrow. They are predicting more bad weather over the weekend. Poor Japanese fans with the cherry blossoms. They'll sit there patiently, as they always do. They just love seeing the drivers on the pit apron, let alone driving out on the circuit. So they love every second of it, I know. And Formula One will then be racing at Suzuka. What a Grand Prix it will be this weekend. Looks pretty close. That Pirelli soft tyre looks interesting, that is for sure. And Max Verstappen, as ever, looks good in the Red Bull, but there'll be quite a lot of changes, I think, to that car as we go into the weekend. Ferrari looks strong, and Mercedes, for the first time this year, look reasonably okay. We'll see what happens tomorrow. See you then.